Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah.
There can't be any God by the name Allah. Muhammad never existed. Even if there is a God or gods, Allah is not the God worthy of being worshipped.
Daud Kim입니다. Daud Kim.
Mufassil Islam.
First of all, I got so many congratulations.
First of all, I got so many threats, abuses, and all of them were surrounding the fact that I had left Islam.
I got a lot of questions, and 80% of questions were, why did you become a Muslim?
Today I'm going to explain to you why I left Islam, how I became an ex-Muslim, Mufassil Islam.
Unfortunately, my first memory of Islam was 9/11. At that time, I was really young, like 8 years old. I watched a huge building collapse on TV.
Unfortunately, I can't remember when I became a Muslim, but I do remember being circumcised and the pain of it. I was about 10 years old then. The whole world collapsed on me because the pain was unbearable. At that time, I heard the word circumcision, khatna, Musalmani. I realized then that Islam made me burn, and my dad told me that Prophet Abraham wanted to slaughter his own son for the sake of Allah.
I was really shocked, and that time I heard the word Islam on TV. So that was the first time I heard the word Islam. I don't know well, but I thought Islam is dangerous because media always show the negative images about Islam: war, oppression, terrorism. So I also thought that they are dangerous and strict. A lot of time passed. Actually, I was a Catholic, but I didn't interest in any religion. I was just busy at living my life. But my bad thinking about Islam completely broke down one day in Indonesia. First, they were really kind than I expected. And second is that so many girls are covering their faces with veils. I didn't even know the word hijab. And you know, Indonesia is really hot country. So I was so curious. So I asked a girl who wear hijab, why are you wearing scarf on your face? Did someone force you? And he said, I'm a diamond. Incredibly precious. So I don't want to show this to other people. Nobody forced me. This is my choice and I'm so proud of it. At the moment, I was really shocked. I thought that was oppression, but they were really proud of this. Yeah, it was really interesting. What made her so proud? Because I wanted to do more creative things. So that's why I started YouTube. And I randomly talked about the memories about Muslim in Indonesia, and suddenly so many people watched that video. And that was my second meeting with Islam. I didn't notice the first sign, but this time it was different. It's related to my situation. Okay, I'll tell you. I couldn't tell to anyone, but actually I was having a hard time because my goal of my life was music. But I should quit, so I lost my motivation of life. I wanted to go the next step, but I don't know how. I was totally lost. There was no peace in my mind. But surprisingly, at that time, it gave me a chance to meet Islam. Through this, I could meet many Muslims. They're real Muslims, not in the media. So I got along with them and found out what I didn't know about Islam. Why do they believe in Allah? Why do they pray? Why don't they eat pork? Why don't they drink? And what is halal and what is haram? And who is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? Many things. I learned one by one. And I found something really special I never felt before. It's very hard to explain, but I felt they have something that I'm missing. Because the way they treat their lives is definitely different from mine. I thought life is competition, and only surviving the competition is success. I thought I have to fight and win, but they were different. They always help others, and they were always thankful for what was given for them. This impressed me a lot. The attitude of their life. My Muslim friend told me life is a journey, not a competition. And the purpose of this journey is to go on the right path according to the God, Allah, the most glorified and the most high. If you follow Allah on the right path, there will be a great present at the end of this journey. Yeah, that's Jannah, the paradise. When I heard this, I felt like someone punched my face so hard. The belief that you're going to the right path, it touched and moved my heart. In the beginning and the end of this everything, there was Allah. This was the something I was looking for. So to know about this, I started to follow their practice. I read the Quran, studied about Muhammad, peace be upon him. I fasted for a month in Ramadan. I went to mosque and prayed. It happened in just a few months. As I experienced their practice little by little, my faith also grew up. The faith in Allah, who created me and also guide me. The Absolute, the most gracious and most merciful. And these things never happened in one time. I found it little by little, and the important thing is I found it myself. Nobody forced me. As I fasted, I found gratitude for Allah, and I found that prayer to Allah would give me the peace of mind. So finally, I was sure about my belief. So I thought about becoming a Muslim. But nevertheless, I hesitated for a long time. There are reasons. Many people told me that the pork and alcohol, but I didn't think it's not very difficult if I have faith. There were other reasons. First, can I overcome the prejudice of others as a Muslim? And second, am I perfectly prepared to be a Muslim? And also a position for my family. For me, it was a big problem and pressure. I pressed myself a lot. But after that, I thought like this. Why am I pressing myself? Islam is a religion that creates a relationship between me and Allah, not others. If Allah made a plan for me, only Allah can give me the answer. So I visited the mosque and asked him, what do I have to do? And surprisingly, my thoughts organized. I got the conclusion. I have faith and will to practice. So I don't need to hesitate anymore. I don't need to care other people's opinion because my life is mine, not others. My relationship with Allah is only mine. They can take the responsibility about my life, even my mom and dad. But of course I love mom and dad. And one more thing about the perfect preparation. There's no perfect human. There is no perfect thing except Allah. But can't be a Muslim because I'm afraid of the mistakes I'll make in the future. I think this is excuse for myself. Of course, I'll make a mistake because I'm not perfect. Already I had a lot of mistakes, but I believe He will lead me back in the right way. As He led me here, I'm in His plan. So I know He helps me. So that's why I decide and live it. That's my story. So now I'm Daud, and I'm so proud of that. I was sailing alone on a small boat over a dark and huge sea. I was sinking without knowing where to go. But the merciful Allah recognized and signaled me. And fortunately, I noticed and catched it. And finally, I knew that following Allah is the purpose of this journey. So now, I know where do I have to go. He gave me the light. And I believe that is the greatest blessings and gift in my life. So I'm like a baby Muslim who doesn't know anything well yet. But I will try to be a good Muslim, little by little.
Media never shows enough of Islam, the real face of Islam. Killing of apostates, killing of freedom of speech, banishing critics of Islam from their lands and homes, ostracizing them from their own families, sending them abuses relentlessly. I used to think Muslim brothers and sisters were loving towards all humans. Actually, I was still a devout Muslim. I was interested in all religions. I was busy in preaching Islam and debating with people of other faiths. But the total preconceived idea of Islam broke down one day when I heard the killing of innocent people in a terrorist attack in Paris. And I protested. And I uploaded a video condemning the terrorist attack in Paris. I was still a devout Muslim then. But I didn't know the real face of Islam until that point. I didn't know there were so many extremists among the Muslim people. Even my closest friends started sending me abuses and threats. I couldn't really comprehend that. First of all, it shocked me when I found out even my own mother started throwing abuses at me. My closest friends ostracized me. And I realized that so many were following Islam without even understanding the real message of Islam. And I realized many of them didn't even know their own scripture. Bangladesh is really a hot country. That's where I come from. And I was wondering why they were wearing scarves and burqas. And I realized that many were killed and many were abused for not wearing the hijab and for not covering themselves up. Women were killed in Afghanistan, whipped in Afghanistan. They were also whipped in Bangladesh for not covering up themselves. And I found out they were not diamonds, rather, they were being considered as food, and we were the omnivorous, gluttonous species, men. Diamonds are cut and sharpened to be displayed as the most coveted thing on the planet. But women were considered food and we were just flies. So we men could show ourselves because we were simply eaters and they were our dinner. Almost all the parents of burqa wearing women and almost all the husbands of burqa hijab wearing women were beard, and they would not like their wives to take off their covers. And I was shocked that women were treated this way. But they were really unable to talk about this, and they would wear a happy face, as if the bird in a cage would call the free birds in the sky to be crazy. They were almost in all cases brainwashed. Many minor girls were being forced to wear burqas just to make them used to wearing chains from the early childhood. One who never has the taste of freedom, one who doesn't know how to appreciate one's own self esteem, would surely condemn freedom. I thought that if there was a creator or if there was humanity, I was set in motion to tell the truth. So I wanted to dig deeper into Islamic theology. I started studying historiography, not history only, historiography of Islam. I started studying archaeology and manuscripts of Islamic sources, and I also examined the Arabic grammar. And I was already famous on YouTube and Facebook as a Muslim preacher until that time. And suddenly I started getting hurls of abuses. My Facebook verified pages and my YouTube verified pages got hacked. And I started getting thousands of death threats, for which I had to take Facebook to the British High Court. And I'm still pursuing cases against Google and YouTube. I have lost more than a dozen channels on YouTube and more than a dozen verified accounts on other platforms. Suddenly, hundreds and thousands of my followers started unsubscribing and started acting in a tribal way. I was being ostracized. I had to go in hiding. I was living in England and I was told if I ever had desire of coming back to my motherland, Bangladesh, I would be killed. Many like me got killed and many of them were denied having a passport of Bangladesh ever again. But until that time, the goal of my life was Islam and to make Islam victorious. And I used to think Islam was justice, Islam was peace, Islam was loving for all mankind. But I was so depressed, I became utterly shocked. And I started finding out the real fact that Hadiths were full of atrocities where there were direct evidences that so-called Prophet of Islam had instructed raping of war captives. And he had many concubines. And almost all the companions of the so-called Prophet Muhammad were engaged in having sexual orgies, and they were barbaric. And we were uttering prayers in Arabic. They had no basis in Quran. They had no basis in Hadiths even. I couldn't find how to pray from Hadiths. I couldn't find how to pray in Quran. I found out there was not a single verse in the entire Quran where it said that I should be bowing to the Kaaba in Mecca 5 times a day. And there were tricks like Masjid al-Haram were translated as Kaaba, Baitul Atiq was translated as Kaaba. There was not a single verse in the entire Quran ordering me to go to Hajj and pilgrimage in Mecca. Rather, there were verses like where non-Muslims were considered untouchable and they were considered dirty, like in chapter 9, verse 28. And I was ordered to get pleasure even if I had to kill a non-Muslim because they were enemies of Islam, like Surah 9, verse 14 to 17. I was also shocked that I was ordered to ostracize my own parents and other close family members if they were not believers, like in Surah 9 or chapter 9, verse 23. I was uttering prayers in Arabic called Dua Kunut, where I was promising to God that I will ostracize myself from non believers. And I was also shocked when I read again in chapter Baina of the Quran, where non Muslims were called the worst of creatures. I was shocked that all my life I was blind. I didn't understand the real Islam until it hit me hard when I questioned the atrocities being carried out by Islamist extremists. I found out the so-called vast majority of Muslims were silent complacents with these extremist views. Almost all of them agreed that Quran and Hadith should be followed unquestionably, especially the first two Hadith collections, Bukhari and Muslim. I was shocked to find out that more than 30% of the Quran could not be verified before the 9th century. I was also shocked to find out that the most revered Hadith collection, Bukhari, could not be traced before the 11th century. I was also shocked to find out there was not a single complete Quran before the 11th century. And the claim of Quran being memorized from the beginning was all claims only, and they were never verified. Even the name Muhammad could not be grammatically sustained in Arabic. There was no archaeological evidence of Kaaba being there in Saudi Arabia before the 9th century. There was not a verifiable source to confirm that Muhammad died in Medina and was buried in a town called Medina before the 9th century. I was totally alone. But at last, I found out who were the real Muslims. The real Muslims were who really followed the Islam by the book. But those who call themselves real Muslim, the vast majority of them are really good people because they don't know Islam. For example, Bangladesh is a vastly Muslim populated country, but almost all of them don't know what they utter during their prayer because they pray in Arabic like mantras. They appear to be ritualistic. They're wearing burqas, they're wearing face veils, they're wearing beard, they're attending mosques 5 times a day. But stop them and ask them even the simplest meaning of Subhana Rabbiyal Ala when they bow, they won't be able to tell you. And I found out even if you question the simplest things about Islam in a critical manner, they will become suspicious about you and they will call you munafiq. And the punishment of apostasy was death. And I realized what I did not realize all my life about Islam. And I found out they were mixing up the probability of existence of a God or creator with the character of this God named Allah. Because I believe that even if there is a creator, that creator can't be like that of Allah in the Quran, who descends and goes up just to listen to his followers, whose throne is being carried by angels, and who promises me whores in heaven, and my wife will be watching me having relentless sex hereafter. A heaven can't be so cheap. A heaven can't be like having food only. There was no instruction for music. There was no instruction for having good, lively chats about humanity. And I found out God was Al-Muntakim, very, very revengeful. God can't be revengeful like that. God can't be so angry like that. He can't be suffering like that of an schizophrenia patient who will be switching his mind every few verses. They will condemn drinking, but still they will be promising drinks hereafter, like Sarabun Tahara. And Muslim scholars will engage in mental gymnastics to say the drinks hereafter will not be intoxicating, but there is no such thing in the Quran. No Muslim could justify Bukhari Hadith 5255 to me. Nobody could justify to me why Muhammad had to marry someone at the age of 6 and why he could have sex with someone at the age of 9 when that girl was not mentally developed, not physically developed. Just having period could not be the justification of having sex with a minor. Muhammad is supposed to be an example for all time, but I could not justify that. Hadiths and Quranic verses were full of contradictions. The more you know, the more questions arise. But it says in the Quran that I can't question God. He will be the only one to ask question. Why do I have to follow a religion unquestionably? Why am I told that I will be killed if I had left that faith? Why do I believe that even if I question the basic things about Islam, I'll be viewed as a munafiq or a betrayer or a double crosser or a hypocrite? Why do I have to be banished from my own homeland for leaving Islam? You can go back to your country living Catholicism, but I cannot go back to my country for leaving Islam. And I found out Islam was full of competition. In Islam, life was like that of being in chains everywhere. How to brush your teeth, how to comb your hair, how to take your steps, how to have sex, what food to wear, which color of clothing to wear, which metals to use, who to keep company with, how to treat even the slightest enjoyments of life. I had no freedom. Life was full of instructions. I had no self-respect. I had no self-dignity. I was considered a walking slave. And all my life was to be spent emulating someone about whose identity I was not even clear about and whose existence you can't even prove today. And I realized that you can't prove the existence of his closest companions and you can't even prove the existence of his own wives. And I realized we were, in fact, trying to emulate ghosts, especially when I'm instructed to follow the companions of the Prophet when the companions themselves were killing one another. And I was told to keep my mouth shut. It's like counting your blessings every single moment. If you do this, you have this number of barakats or blessings. If you do that, you have this number of barakats or blessings. Life can't be this kind of suffocating. This was horrible. I suddenly realized my life had no color. But when I left Islam, suddenly my life became colorful. And I was told if I had left Islam, I would become characterless. But rather, I found out that Islam was making me characterless. Islam was making my mind barbaric. Islam was making me narrow-minded. Islam was making me hate non-Muslims, apostates. And I couldn't find help from any of my Muslim friends. They would never be able to engage with me patiently. They will lose their temper. They will start hurling abuses towards me. And even the slightest question about Islam's certain basis, they would hit me hard with insults. I'll be scared that they would be brandishing me as a munafiq or betrayer and they would order my death. This made me scared and I had to go in hiding. I lost my son, I lost my wife, I lost my family, I lost my mother, I lost my country. Islam made me realize the life was full of tests. And God needed to find out how much I loved Him by throwing me in trouble. And he said that in Quran, that he would test me with money, he would test me with family, he would test me with everything. And I got sick and tired of being tested by a God who wanted to test my love for him just by putting me in trouble. That was disgusting. And I realized the purpose of my life was to be a human soul, a good human being, not to serve any barbaric god, not to emulate a ghost. I realized God can't be Allah, and Allah is a character, is full of vengeance. Allah can't be a God full of compassion. And I realized if I followed Allah, I will have a hellish life. I don't want to be part of a death cult. And I realized the Islam made me feel like a tribal man. Islam made me believe Muhammad as the cult leader, which I rejected. And that was hell on earth. And when I realized it, I felt like waking up from a nightmare. It made me change my understanding of life. And I started loving humans, whoever he might be, believer or non-believer, Christian, Jews, or Muslims. I realized that only humanity had the answer, not Islam, not even any other religion. The beginning and ending, even if there is a creator or creators or creating power, that God, or those gods can't be like that of Allah. This was the answer I was looking for all my life. And to realize it, I engaged science, I engaged logic, I engaged reason, I engaged patience, and I deciphered deep into the instructions of Islam. And I found out Muslims couldn't conquer or unite even about the simplest things of Islam in history. For example, what was the date of Muhammad's birth? What was the name, original name of the greatest hadith collector of Islam, Abu Huraira? What was his name? And Islamic scholars would give me 15 different names. Islamic scholars would give me various dates of the birthday of Muhammad. And I found out that even the authenticity of the earliest biography of Muhammad written by so-called Ibn Ishaq could not be established in history to be authentic. I started studying, re-examining Muhammad's life from a neutral point of view. And I started questioning every source of Islamic history. And I realized all those sources were simply claims. They could not be verified in a rational way. They could not be verified archaeologically. They could not be verified by any authentic manuscript or inscription even. And I realized that Islam was simply an effort to bring all religions in one box like a punch, and it became toxic. It makes you scared about life all the time. It makes you worry all the time. It makes you count your blessings all the time. You never have freedom of thought. You do not have freedom of conscience. You do not have freedom of reasoning. You do not have freedom of speech. As I realized Islam more and more, my faith in Islam vanished. I examined Islam from every angle. I tried to keep hanging on to this faith, but I could not. I relied on Islam basing on Quran only even, but that didn't work because I found out Quran had no basis whatsoever. Allah couldn't have been merciful, and Allah, who is so barbaric, so hostile, so vengeful, could never be merciful. I realized it little by little, and I found it out all by myself with the help of a reasonable mind. Suddenly, I realized and woke up with an understanding that why do I have to keep on pleasing a God who is gluttonous for being praised? A God who says he doesn't need anything, but still he becomes angry if I don't praise him. I didn't want to live the life of a slave anymore. Finally, I am absolutely sure that Islam is nothing but a death cult if you really follow it. And why do I have to hate pigs anyway? If God created the whole universe perfectly, why do we see diseases? Why do we see troubles everywhere? Why does a God have to test me with problems? Islam is a religion that destroys relationships between members of family. Islam is a religion that destroys the relationship between a man and his birthland. I knew I had death threats coming from everywhere, but still I had to speak to free humanity from this death cult. And Muslims, most of them, who are beautiful, who are peace loving, hospitable, in fact, they don't know Islam. And sometimes they hang on to this cultish behavior because of the Islamic clerics who tell them what is Islam and they follow those instructions unquestionably. But they would never let me be free. They would never let me express my opinion. They would kill me for my opinion. They would kill me for me practicing my freedom of speech. And I knew that I would get death threats even underneath this video. I started examining my religion and I found out I was following a cult. Nothing but a cult. And I was ostracized by my own mother, my own country. I love my mom, but still, my mom wouldn't love me back. You, Daud Kim, can go back to South Korea even after leaving Catholicism, but I cannot go back to Bangladesh after leaving Islam. That's the difference between you, your religion, and me and my freedom. Islam is the most imperfect religion that there can be. It tells you how to hate, it tells you how to kill, it tells you exactly what to hate, when to hate, which sword to use, where exactly to hit, like hit in your fingertips, like hit in your hand, hit in the back of your neck, and also which sword and how to use. It tells you how to execute hate that you cannot find in any other religion. It even teaches you how to insult the wise people, like how to name Abul Hakam, the father or the most gracious justice of his time, and to how to brand him Abu Jahl, father of ignorance, by the so-called holy prophet. Even he taught us how to hurl abuses. He couldn't have been, even if he existed, a good man. Still, I make mistakes, and if I make mistakes, I make corrections. But if you ever claim that there are mistakes in Islam, you will be killed by Islamist extremists, and the so-called peace-loving Muslims will keep their mouth shut. And now I am an ex-Muslim, and I'm proud of it. I was a slave, and I didn't know what was freedom. Now I do. And finally, I realized giving up all religions and giving up all mythological beliefs, irrational beliefs, baseless beliefs, these were the right steps to take for a human of the 21st century. And now I know how to let humanity reign in my life and how to make me better each day. And I collect instructions and I collect guidelines from all available sources. And I listen to great people. I read books and I read philosophy. I reason and I love people. Even when they hate me, even when they threat me. This is the real blessing of life. And what a wonderful life. I love life and I value life. And now at last, I think I have attained maturity. Daud, why don't you question even the slightest things I mentioned here? Why don't you bring it on in your discussion table? You will see, suddenly overnight, you will lose your millions of followers and you will also start getting death threats. Even if you show your support to me about my freedom of speech. Go ahead, try it.